the adaptation, we pull some of the history pieces that Robin talked about, her family's experience at Carlisle, Indian boarding schools, some of the other legislations that have caused really, disparities, that have caused harm, has caused broken relationships between Indigenous, non-Indigenous people. Because in Canada, we've been on a journey of truth and reconciliation since the early 2000s. But in the United States, your journey is beginning in a different way. And so for many young people reading, and the not so young, this will be the very first time they've heard about boarding schools, Carlisle, other aspects. So that's a little bit more clear and upfront. The social and emotional learning aspect is something that I've brought out through those braids of Sweetgrass. We have reflection statements and questions at different places. Each chapter ends with a call to action. Sometimes those calls to action might be a little more like actually having steps to take. And sometimes it's like, go for a walk where you live and notice something you haven't noticed before. And then the glossary. So for me, because my brain is not a science brain, even though I'm a psychiatric nurse, there were many words that I was like, I gotta look up what this means. Right. So we put the glossary right beside those words now. I think the elements of kindness, especially the story in here about witch Hazel and Hazel, told from Robin's daughter Larkin. The honorable harvest is another place where it's much more, it's very focused. And I've taken what was, a really large section and began to chunk it a little bit more, so that also if Braiding Sweetgrass is for young adults is being used in the classroom, an educator can say, I just want you to read the two sections on page 161 and 162, so that we don't give these huge chapters to young people to read. Also because when we give huge chapters to read, some of those small pieces that we just have a little bit to read, it lands in a different way. But if I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to read 22 pages tonight, it doesn't land if I only have to read 2, right? And it's sort of, your beautiful question, Nicole, around worldview. I think that's part of it, right? Is often in Western worldview, it's like, let's get like quantity is really important instead of like the quality. Because sometimes we could take one concept and it changes our whole life trajectory. So I think those are a few pieces. There's a lot of focus on being in reciprocal relationships and gifts. Yeah, it was very hard to choose. Yeah, and I couldn't say, what are we cutting, because it felt disrespectful. Right. So what I would say is, what are we leaving for the reader when they read the original manuscript?